progressive YouTube host Bryan Tyler Cohen and Geraldo Rivera. Geraldo, I start with you as a media mentor. I must say, we're a little quiet about these protests in the media, to be honest. You know, all 50 states, you got tens of thousands of people on streets across the country. It is not blowing up in the news. Why?
Well, I don't know. First, let me just quickly say that I think that President Trump averted a crisis of his own making with that great performance in today's marathon press conference. I think that the financial aspect, the stock market aspect of this crazy up and down is going to be better tomorrow than it was today, and it's going to keep getting better. In terms of Stephen A. Smith, he's a smart man. He's charismatic. He's, engaging in a way that, you don't have. You certainly didn't have with Kamala Harris or Tim Walz. I think he automatically right now leaps to the third place among my favorite Democrats. You have Gavin Newsom, Josh Shapiro, and Stephen A. Smith. I think he's right there in the first trifecta. He's right up. He could clean the stage of any of the establishment Democrats he goes against, except for the two men I mentioned.
What are you ignoring the protests for, Geraldo? I thought you were a man of the people.
Well, I think that the protests are, to me, they have a feeling that there's a lot of people have lost their jobs. A lot of people have been very personally and profoundly affected by this. My sense is that the vast majority of the people that hit the streets were people who were personally hurt by Trump's draconian policies, his clumsiness, his defiance, his lack of sensitivity, and the fact that they're out of work. In a market, I'm not sure what their prospects are now. They've emptied out all the Department of Education and all USAID and all these other agencies, and my sense is that this is an event that was mostly motivated. My sense is by federal employees, unions, and so forth, Chris.
But I'm just saying, Brian, if we saw this during the Biden administration, all 50 states putting people out who are saying we have a problem with the administration, especially right after, to the extent that any of them have 401ks, given the collapse of the pension structure in this country, their 401ks just took it in the hiney at the end of last week. Should more be made of this?
The media ignores this at its own peril. The reality is that we went through the first Trump administration listening to every single person in a diner somewhere in America, and that was enough to make primetime news. But now when we have millions of people taking to the streets in all 50 states across the country, in many cases, at least anecdotally speaking, bigger crowds than we even saw in 2017, that is a harbinger of things to come. And it's a testament to the energy that is kind of taking hold of the Democratic Party or taking hold of the anti-Trump coalition, which, look, if you look back to 2017 when there were those women's marches, it might have been easy to cast it off as like, okay, you have the opponents to Donald Trump, and of course he's got enemies. Everybody knows who Donald Trump is, but that ushered in the biggest margin in modern American history in terms of Democratic overperformance in the House in modern American history. Democrats flipped 41 seats in the House. So again, we ignore what's happening on the ground at our own peril. People have a thirst, a hunger right now to fight, and they're showing it in a lot of different ways. That protest being chief among them.
Now, Brian, quick follow to you and then back to my man, Geraldo. And I don't want to nitpick and I don't want to exaggerate this point, and it was really just in D.C. I saw this, but it was also a pretty big demonstration in D.C. Do you think you guys have learned, stick with the majority, get rid of the pro-Hamas, flying the Palestine flags? That's not where this country is. Everybody's got the right to their view, but that your party should not have Palestinian flags and pro-Hamas supporters kind of pari passu with everybody else in your party.
Look, I know that you have been a vocal proponent of sticking on the right side of those 80-20 issues, and I think right now we have the advantage, so to speak, from the minority, where really the only thing that we should be talking about, as opposed to all of the issues that result in Democratic infighting, The only thing from a political perspective to not engage in political malpractice right now is to focus on those issues that are on, the 80 or 90 side of where the American people lie. And there are plenty of them. It's not like we have to look far. I mean, Donald Trump is taking an axe, Donald Trump and the Republican Party taking an axe to Medicaid and food stamps. They've already laid out in their budget blueprint that they want to cut $880 billion from Medicaid, $230 billion from food stamps, gutting the Social Security Administration from the inside by firing 7,000 employees. How are you going to call and get your Social Security issues resolved if there's no employees there to answer the phones? Veterans getting fired, education funding getting slashed, the National Institute of Health, pediatric cancer research getting cut. So there are plenty of these issues that you can, you stick 100 people in a room, 99 of them are going to be on the right side. And those are absolutely the issues that we should be focusing on right now.
Hey, Geraldo, you say that he helped himself in that press conference today. Maybe. I'll defer to you on that. But he has rolled the dice here. These tariffs are going to be real if he doesn't get out, like, right away. And the price is going to be borne disproportionately by the people he now says he's for, the working class. How dangerous?
Two quick points. Number one, Brian mentions the demonstrations of 2017 following the inauguration of Trump the first time. They were far more passionate than these demonstrations in the last couple of days. The women's movement, with the women's rights on the table, were with the pink hats I was in D.C. it was a sea of pink. And with emotions and sincerity, and no Palestinian flags, no American flags flying upside down, all these other issues that are the 20 of the 80 20 formula that you make so well. The other thing is, I was in Japan last week, and there were no American cars there. I looked for them.
Yeah,
there was not a Buick, not a Ford, not a Chevy, not a Caddy. I saw Bentleys, I saw Mercedes in Japan, in Tokyo. I didn't see a number. The issue is real. So maybe he stumbled on it. Maybe he didn't time it. Didn't intend it to be out now. The Pakakta, graphic that it's not even in alphabetical order. It makes no sense. But it's a real issue. It's a visceral issue. And again, there's the passion. It's a visceral issue. Why aren't they buying ours? And we have to, they're dumping their stuff here. And I think that he helps himself ultimately because I believe, as I said before, the market stabilizes tomorrow and works its way steadily back. He announces one deal after the other, Japan and Israel. Now let's get the European Union on board. Let's go after the Chinese and so on and so forth. I think that he is like Dennis the Menace as the president.
Chris, can I
it's dangerous. But it's also
I'll give you the last
entertaining.
word, Brian. I want that to happen, Geraldo. I just don't know it's going to happen as soon as you think. Last word, Brian.
I don't think it's going to happen either. And I think that Donald Trump has been deluded into thinking that everybody is as weak and sycophantic as the people he surrounds himself with. We're already seeing the EU impose retaliatory tariffs of 25%. There's been reporting that Japan and South Korea are teaming up with China to negotiate trade deals. That's not what Trump is looking for here. And it's not going to be as easy a win as he thinks it is. The second point, and I'll just end with this, is in terms of the energy and enthusiasm, sure, people weren't wearing, pink hats and flooding the streets in those, but if you look at how Democrats have performed or overperformed in these recent special elections, we're looking at two special elections that took place in Florida, even though Democrats didn't win, an average 16% overperformance, 16 points to the left overperformance from where it was in 2024. You look at Wisconsin, there was an 11-point overperformance from what we saw in 2024, very similar to what we saw in 2017. The average overperformance right now is about 10 points. In 2017, in that midterm cycle, it was 11 points.
I don't disagree on the Wisconsin analysis. You have to be careful about red state or blue state analysis because overperformance doesn't mean the same thing because of the cushion of what the eventual outcome will be. But the Wisconsin metric is a real one to watch. But you got to you got to manifest that in your messaging and what you're about consistently over time. Politics has a marketing component, Brian. That is not unlike sales of any other kind, and Trump knows this. You got to get the product in front of people 6, 7, 8, 9 times before they start to grab onto it. This is the same thing. Brian, thank you very much. Appreciate the conversation. Geraldo, I love you. Welcome back from Japan. It's good to have you both.
Here, brother.
4 minutes and 30
Good talking
seconds.
to you guys.
Hey, thanks for watching. Go to joinnn.com to find NewsNation on your screen. And don't forget, click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.